Hey everyone, welcome back once again to Berlin Noir. It has been 5 or 6 months since the last episode in the series, and I'm sure many of you have wondered where I've been. If you happen to follow me on Discord, then you would have seen a couple posts I made on there regarding where I've been. But I just want to take the first minute or two here in the very start just to let everyone else know. Since I've definitely kind of been gone for a while. But basically, what happened was I was approached by someone to design an open world map using city skylines for an upcoming blockchain video game. They just wanted me to use city skylines to plan basically the entire map out. So, the roads, the infrastructure, of course, all the buildings on the map. Putting in interesting terrain, all that type of stuff. And that's what I've been doing. That's where I've been this entire time. I didn't want to go back and forth between that and this, since I didn't want to screw any settings or risk messing or breaking that save for that build that I was doing for them, since of course that was for I was on a timetable and getting paid for that, so I didn't want to screw that up at all. So I just figured it was best to take a break from Berlin Noir and focus only on that. Also, of course, I could finish it much more quickly. And considering I had built an entire map, which was not super detailed, but somewhat detailed in only 5-6 months, it definitely went along pretty quickly. I can't really say too much more as far as details, what it was or anything. I can't really show any pictures, unfortunately, since it's just like anything else. I have to keep it a secret, of course, until it comes out, or a trailer or something like that. But it was definitely really cool to use City Skylines as a practical tool, more or less, as a program to some extent. But yeah, that's more or less all on that. And I guess let's get into today's video. So for today, we're going to be filling in really only this tiny little block here. I did some of the neighboring blocks off camera since it was just simple buildings and such. But this area has been empty for quite some time. I just simply didn't know what to build here. I wasn't really aware of anything that was really cool or unique here, beyond just some simple I'm not sure, museums or government buildings that existed here, and some still of course do exist today. But with those type of things, you're kind of limited on the availability of assets for museums and stuff like that. That fit the time period, that fit the style, to be in a German city. So I try not to use those types of assets too frequently to avoid, reusing them. But I did come across this cool building, which is the Europa House, and which is right next to that on the right there, the Deutschland House. And they're just a modern building, of course, modern for the time, that was built between 1924 and 1931. So it was completed at various stages. So it was actually part of it opened up in 1926. And apparently there was some bickering and arguing over what should continue next between probably the architects, designers, the city, who knows. So I guess for a few years there wasn't a whole lot of progress, and this main tower here that I'm building right now, this I don't believe was finished until 1931. I didn't see anything say that exactly. All I saw that was in 1926, the lower part and the Deutschland House was finished. So I imagine between 26 and 31 this was completed at some point. But what I decided to do was, as you see, I'm using PO to build this building, exclusively, from scratch, right? Just using cubes, which, if you're curious how that works, I have a tutorial which I'll put in the description on how to do that, how to get textures for the cubes, all that type of stuff. Since you can more or less build with any type of building you want, or some limitations, of course. But it's definitely a cool tool to be able to build different types of things like this, because I searched on the workshop for a very, very long time for something similar to this that I could use rather than having to do this with procedural objects. But there just wasn't something exactly that I wanted, nothing super similar or close. So since it is a simple cube, basically it's just a square of a building. You know, it's very simple, very easy to just use PO to do this. So that's what I decided to do. One thing I didn't do is, in real life, I believe there was actually it was hollow in the center of the building, so there was a hole. Probably, you know, you could look into, see a courtyard, right, if you were looking from above ground. I decided not to do that just for simplicity. And on top of the building, there was a garden, a rooftop garden. I couldn't really get any pictures or anything. I didn't see any, but I did read that somewhere. So I did end up doing something similar to that eventually. I didn't really do quite a garden, but I wanted to go more of a restaurant with some, you know, bushes and flowers around. So kind of a combination between a restaurant and a garden, just to make the rooftop look nice, because you know, it's very, very white and stands out a lot. But yeah, so as you can see, that it did, you know, I guess on screen it looks quite easy, very simple building. You know, what I just did, it's only been a few minutes, right, and we're nearly done with the building. But it is very, very time consuming, for sure. It's for this little block here, so it does include a few other things. It took about 2.5 hours. Most, you know, 3/4 of that just doing this building here. For the bottom, you know, the walk where the entrance, right? As you can see, I didn't use PO, or I should say I didn't use cubes or PO. I did use PO on a building just to make it look like just a storefront, more or less. I wasn't really sure what to use, but a lot of this was going to be kind of covered up because I wanted to have part of it still under construction. So I was almost getting to it a few minutes ago, but basically I mentioned that I think the tower part of this wasn't built until later. So probably, I'm guessing, in 1929 it was still under construction. But considering this is, you know, right next to Anhalter Bahnhof, and it's, you know, I want this to look nice, I figured I want the bigger part of it, you know, the tower part, to be completed, and then have elements of, you know, part of it being under construction. So what I did was having this section of the building being under construction, just adding, you know, simple, can't think of what they're called all of a sudden, but those pieces of metal, dear God, I-beams, there we go, I-beams. Adding those, of course, since, you know, that's pretty much the most simplest way to show something is under construction in game, without doing an absurd amount of detailing or anything like that. But yeah, so this area here was thin, kind of like that little segment on the right side of the tower, where it's not very large, just kind of like a connector between the tower and the Deutschland House at the corner there. So yeah, that's basically what I was envisioning there with this, since, you know, I did want to somehow show that it was still under construction, you know, to be accurate to the time period, and so I did that. This is the Deutschland House again. I considered doing that with PO as well, but I happened to find that one building which looks pretty similar. The Deutschland House is a little more interesting, and I'd say the facade, you know, the front of the building looks more cool, not so simple as the main tower, which is basically just that, you know, red and white texture. So I did kind of want to find an actual asset to get a few more details in there, since it is a little more limiting using the PO cubes, unless you want to take an absurd amount of time working on it. But I think it looks pretty good there, using that building, since I think the building's actually supposed to be modern, but it definitely looks reasonably from the same time period. You know, it's, you know, not perfect, of course, but it definitely works pretty well. But so anyways, yeah, so here is the rooftop garden / restaurant that I mentioned. Because this is where I said on the roof, right, it's hollow in the center, right, where that kind of grassy, bushy area is. So since I made it just one ginormous cube, I did need to put something on the roof, make it look interesting, less monotonous, and especially because that texture that I use is very reflective and bright. That white, which I tried to make darker with Photoshop beforehand, but in game, textures are much, much brighter. I mean, of course, it depends on your lighting settings and stuff, but I have things pretty bright. Most people tend to have things a little brighter. So yeah, I tried to darken it, but it was still very, very bright. So yeah, I definitely had to cover that up one way or another. But yeah, I do like how this roof turned out. It looks definitely like a really nice place to be in the city. Obviously, you have awesome views. You have the train station there, but I'm sure you can see over, of course, all the cathedrals around the city. Definitely would look really, really nice. But one thing that I unfortunately noticed a little too late, because I tried to fix it, but it gets very difficult with all those PO'd objects in the same area. It gets impossible to move different things, adjust scaling. But basically, the building is a little short. It's not as tall as it should be. I did do it the 10 stories, which it is in real life, 10 stories, minus the bottom part where the entrance and such, and the very, very top, which used to be the garden, now that I believe it's enclosed. But I did make it the correct number of stories, but the windows I used, I actually rotated on their side, and I should have made them a little taller just with procedural objects, just scaled it up just a tad, because it doesn't really have that super, it doesn't look like a high rise necessarily. It's almost the same height as all the tall buildings around it. So if you look at that together, it kind of looks a little off, a little weird, but I'd say it's still overall looks really nice nonetheless. If you're not really paying attention to scale, which if it's just in a quick cinematic, you're probably not going to really notice it, although now you might since I mentioned it. But yeah, in cinematics and such, it looks really nice. One thing I definitely wish I could have done is added some cool signs, since in some of the pictures you'll see that there were a lot of signs and neon lights and stuff all around it, which I guess perhaps since it's technically under construction at this time, makes sense not to have a ton of lights and signs and such. But one, I guess, since the Deutschland House was finished at this point, it would have made sense to put some more stuff on there, but I don't know, there's just not a whole lot available to do that and, fit the theme. But, so for the rest of this little block here, as you can see, it's kind of just, I don't know, it's I guess a little park kind of next to some sort of government building. I'm guessing that one that has the black roof. It looks kind of like a small little palace. Not really sure what it was back then. And then this other building there, that's a theater of some kind. At least that's what the asset is. Again, not really sure what it was back then, but since, like I mentioned, there's not a whole lot available as far as assets go, especially to fit in this relatively small area. I didn't get too picky as far as what I was putting there. Since of course I wanted the main focus for your eyes to be on the tower there and the custom PO work. Since that was the inspiration for this episode, anyways. But what I'm doing now is just I did take a quick little break from the towers to kind of work on this because I wanted to gauge how much space I had for the construction site next to the tower there, or the high rise. I guess tower's not really an accurate description. But yeah, I did light detailing, just adding some simple trees and pathways, kind of mimicking some of the cool little garden park area that I saw in here. Yeah, this definitely certainly looked like a nice area, kind of in the center of all these very large blocks in the center of Berlin, all these huge buildings, residential, whatever buildings. And then you have this nice little kind of open area surrounded by some more nicer buildings with a little park, bunch of trees. I'm sure it would have been a nice little escape from the rest of the big city there. But yeah, so here we do the just kind of general detailing for the construction site, just adding random props, which for construction sites, especially for this time period, you're not going to have fancy cranes or anything like that are towering over the building or anything like that. So basically just spam whatever random props you have that could plausibly be in a construction site and more or less call it a day. It looks cool for sure, kind of like I said, even though I wanted this area to look nice, this kind of corner is away from the train station, kind of in between both the Anhalter and Potsdamer Bahnhof. So it does kind of break up the monotony of having all these very large blocks and such, having this, just construction site there. So it's one thing cool about building a Berlin in 1929, or just the 1920s in general, which is more or less what I'm going for, because not to be so specific with just one year, but as if you're familiar with the time period in the city, then you know that there was a whole lot of changes going for the city design and new buildings, new constructions going on. So it's really just a perfect time period to be doing something like this, just because there's so many options of things being built around this time period, and really changing the look of the city overall. But yeah, so now back to detailing the whatever these are again. I'm not sure if they'd be government buildings or museums or maybe concert halls, something like that. Again, doesn't really need to be specific. But yeah, that's mostly it for the episode. Just some light detailing here, just putting in trees, since there's a ton of tree cover in this little center green area. But yeah, I'm pretty thrilled to be back, in the city. For a couple days, I didn't actually record anything. I just kind of flew around, just did some small tweaks here or there, built some small blocks that didn't really have anything interesting going on, just to get back into the feel of things, have some fun building for a change, rather than being on a, basically having to get things done on a timetable, like for the previous job that I was doing, like as I mentioned, for designing that open map for the game. But yeah, I plan on doing the regular uploads every week, maybe every other week occasionally. But yeah, give me your ideas once again. Hopefully you're all excited to be back and in Berlin Noir. So definitely give me your ideas. If you want to see things updated, if you want to see things built further out of the city, or anything it is, whatever it is, just shoot your ideas in the comments, and I'll definitely take a look and try my best to build them. But so that is going to do it for today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed being back in Berlin Noir, and I will see you all next time.